All right, so today we're going to be talking about therapeutic cloning. So, some background biology, some keywords and definitions that you'll need to know to kind of understand what we're talking about. Embryonic stem cells are cells that come from early embryos, which can divide and can become any type of cell in the body. Adult stem cells are cells that are found in adult tissues like fat tissues, bone marrow, stuff like that. But currently are limited to becoming just similar types of cells, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Mitosis is the process of cell division in which a cell produces identical copies of itself. A zygote is a cell that has the complete genetic components to form an organism. And then a somatic cell, for our purposes, somatic cells are cells that contain a full set of 46 chromosomes. So, what is therapeutic cloning? Therapeutic cloning is the act of implanting the genetic information of a patient's cell into an unfertilized donor embryonic cell in a process called somatic cell nuclei transfer. So, what does that look like? So, basically, what that looks like is we're taking a patient, so someone who has, an ailment that they need curing. So we're taking a healthy patient cell, which can be anything from, skin cells on. And then we're also utilizing a donor egg, which is unfertilized. So it only has the 23 chromosomes, and then the patient cell has 46. And we're going to go ahead and remove those chromosomes from the donor egg, and we're going to replace them here with the 46 chromosomes, and this is the process of somatic cell nuclei transfer. So we're transferring the DNA, the nuclei here, from the healthy patient cell into the donor egg, which then creates a zygote, as we talked about just a second ago. And then with a little bit of stimulation to the donor egg, it creates or it triggers mitosis, so this donor egg is able to start making copies of itself to create healthy cells. So why are we doing that? So the idea behind therapeutic cloning is that we're able to create cells from our own genetic makeup. Through this process, we could create cells that the body is lacking, which causes malfunction. So an example of that would be pancreatic cell malfunction in patients with diabetes. And then with proper research and development, this could help us cure diseases we otherwise never be able to cure. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of this, because so far sounds pretty good, right? So the scientific pros and cons here. The pros, the possibility of this type of research affords is something we can't fully fathom just yet, because this opens up a world of opportunity. So therapeutic cloning research needs to be continued in order to fully realize what the potential with this is. But current possibilities that we know of include disease curing and prevention, complete organ growth, possibility to allow same-sex couples to have children with both parent genetics, and that's just, the tip of the iceberg. And honestly, to me, the most important takeaways there. The cons really are, currently adult cells are only able to duplicate similar types of cells. So we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, that adult cells are able to make up similar type of cells, like it says here, blood cells. So further research is needed to be able to continue on trying to make the adult cells as malleable as the embryonic cells, in the sense that we're able to create a lot more possibilities with those adult cells and kind of change the way that they function. And then also another con is that embryonic cells are not easily or ethically resourced, limiting the support of this research and limiting the accessibility of it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the ethics portion of this presentation, but Yeah, so that's just a touch on that. And then we're going to look here at the societal pros and cons. So, pros, starting there. So, therapeutic cloning could cure diseases like diabetes, cancer, and Parkinson's. So, off the cuff, that is, an incredible thought, right? Further research could lead to entire organ growth, as we kind of touched on a little bit earlier. So, the idea of, you need a kidney transplant and you've been on the donor list for so long. This would offer you the possibility to, instead of being on the donor list, potentially grow your own kidney using your own genetic makeup. Um, and so then we kind of talk about that a little bit again here on the third point of pros. Development of therapeutic cloning can reduce the risk of rejection rate of vital organ transplants because they're using your own genetics. So, that's a huge risk when it comes to major organ transplant, is that the organ is ultimately rejected from your body. So the thought here is that you wouldn't have to wait for somebody essentially to die for you to be able to have an organ donor, and the rejection rate would be lower because it's already made up of your own genetics, so your body is more likely to receive that. So then shifting over here to the cons of this, so collecting embryonic stem cells has risks to the donor, which include but are not limited to liver and kidney disease. That's from, hormone treatments like IVF, things that are just challenging for your body to process. Emotional and psychological disturbances, there's a huge issue there when it comes to like bodily autonomy and the emotional toll it takes on you, not just from the influx of hormones going into your body, but really the idea of egg donation. It can be very conflicting to some women, so that is something to consider. And then once again, just struggling with bodily autonomy. Where do I, as a woman, where does my being a woman end and where does me being part of a science experiment start, I think is kind of the idea there. So that's definitely a really important thing to consider, the emotional toll that it can take, and physical toll, talking about disease here. So and then there's also potential spread of disease. So if the donor egg is potentially affected by some sort of virus or disease, it has a potential to be able to spread to the patient who's already sick, and furthering, the state of their being unwell. So this is definitely something to consider here. How we're sourcing these donor eggs, and what kind of process are they going through to ensure the patient's safety. And then because stem cells produce quickly or reproduce quickly by nature, it's kind of the beauty of them here, right? There are risks of developing a tumor from overproduction. So this is something that has been seen in rare cases, but still definitely something to consider because, we're talking about the overall pros and cons here, right, of the health benefits for our society. So, taking all things into consideration, whether they're rare or not, is important, and especially with the future developing of this research, definitely something to just observe and know about. And then here's the biggest thing with this therapeutic cloning as a topic. It boils down to the ethical response here. So the pros, definitely therapeutic cloning can save so many lives. I mean, so many lives. And then with advancement, you would not need to wait for an organ donor like we talked about earlier. So, we already kind of covered really the ethical pros of this, kind of going over the last two topics. But, really think about how many people in the world have cancer, how many people in the world suffer from diabetes or Parkinson's, things like that. In patients with Parkinson's, a lack of dopamine is something that they suffer with. So being able to, generate cells that help produce dopamine in the brain, like, it's a quality of life thing, really. So, and not just saving lives, too, but just the quality of life. Because, especially with like things like cancer, we have, radiation therapies and things that people go through, but it's very damaging and it's very destructive on your body. So the idea of having something less invasive and improving the quality of life, I think, for me, is a real ethical pro. And then here we have to acknowledge the cons of pro life rhetoric, which believes that this process is any potential life, despite the lack of the egg fertilization. So basically, what this is saying is, taking eggs from a woman, whether they're fertilized or not, um, is ending potential life, which I know I'm not supposed to express my personal opinion until the next section, but I mean, really, a woman has a period every month, theoretically, and then loses an egg in that process, and we don't consider that any potential life. So that's just a sidebar there. And then the real thing for me here is the method of egg retrieval is very controversial. Abortion, which is a very sensitive topic right now in the United States. IVF treatment, and then ectopic pregnancies. These are the ways that we're able to currently harvest these eggs. So, abortion is potentially a little more voluntary, IVF as well. But a lot of women don't really realize how detrimental IVF treatments can be to your body. It's an excess of hormones to allow your body to create viable eggs. And then ectopic pregnancies, that's a very sad situation when you want to be pregnant and the pregnancy isn't viable. So there's a lot to consider there. But one thing I would ask you to consider when you're looking at this is kind of a classic trolley cart problem, right? So the trolley cart problem asks you to consider which is more ethical, ending one life to save a group of people, or ending a group of people's lives to save one person. And it may seem like, obviously, to you, whatever your answer is, or if you've ever seen the Good Place. But I would just ask you to consider this. What if that group was a bunch of cells, like our donor eggs are, and what if that one person was your best friend? Do you think that, as a woman, or just as a person in general, if you had the ability, to do something like that, to save your friend by donating an egg, a donor egg cell, I mean, for me, it's pretty simple that I would definitely do it. So my personal position on this is, I think that this therapy is worth continuing. Right now, we don't have cures for diseases like diabetes and Parkinson's, and if we're able to safely continue mastering therapeutic cloning, we would save so many lives from otherwise incurable diseases. I think, just bar none, that's very, very important, and it's hard to turn your attention away from. Just a little soapbox moment for me. We regard curing cancer as one of the loftiest things a person can do because it seems like such an unattainable feat. But we're looking at the answer to these problems and kind of saying, well, it's wrong because embryos have rights, which, again, is its own separate issue as far as, creation and when life begins. So, for me, we're looking at a really viable solution. It just needs a little fine-tuning as far as the harvesting of eggs and bodily autonomy goes. But I think we ultimately this is the most, convincing thing for me here, is I think that we need to continue this research to try to find a way to use these adult stem cells that we already have in our own bodies the same way that we use embryonic stem cells, because if we do that, it really rids us of the ethical argument of potential life, right? And it basically makes it so that we're using our own bodily resources to cure ourselves, with the help of, science labs, doctors, and so forth. But yeah, I mean, using adult stem cells, it really does rid us of that ethical, teeter-totter of right and wrong. So for me, this is the most convincing part, is just that, in recent research, we have been able to see that there is potential to use adult stem cells the same way that we use embryonic stem cells. It needs more research, and I think that that's worth it. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Hopefully I didn't drone on too much. And then my works cited page just for glimpsing. So thank you guys so much.